Greetings, beloved ones, and welcome to Satsang. Today, I wish to talk with you about a subject that is affecting everyone in the world right now, and that is the crisis in the Middle East and what it brings up within us as an emotional, mental, physical response. I know that all of you who hear me speak right now are being affected one way or another. And so I want to address this crisis because it is a world event and it is affecting our collective consciousness in ways that we know and in ways that we don't know. Before satsang, earlier this morning, I sent by email what I call a spiritual overview of what is going on in Israel and Palestine. For those of you who are online, you might want to check your email if you haven't already seen it, because I'm going to be handing out the same overview to people who are sitting here in person so that you can reference it and also use it as a reflection point to see how you're feeling about what I've written. My purpose, beloveds, in doing this is to create a perspective that can hold great suffering in the presence of the divine. That's my purpose. Beloved ones, our human heart is made of compassion, and we, in our best states, know how to relate to suffering. Our heart, by nature, wants to leap up and help. That heart may get covered over, but the idea is that we respond to suffering with a desire to help, and often we don't know how to help, but we wish to. And so, in the presence of suffering, there are all kinds of reactions that are possible, both towards other human beings and also towards the divine. Because our smaller self, the part that's our mind that wants to explain things and rationalize things and make sense of things, doesn't understand why great suffering happens, either individually or to the world as a whole. We can't comprehend it. We know that it is, but we don't know why it is. And so when there is tragedy, disaster, war, the heart leaps up, but the mind says, why is this happening? And then wants to blame somebody because it doesn't know what else to do except blame somebody. Why is this happening? And then I'm putting this in a larger perspective, even though we're talking about the specifics of what's going on in Israel and Palestine. The larger perspective is the question of how do we hold suffering in the divine, not without it, because it's easy to do it without it. We just decide somebody's wrong and somebody's right, and we align with the position or belief or perspective that we hold to be right and blame the others for being wrong. That's easy to do, and human beings do it all the time. We do it in our personal relationships all the time. We do it on the global level all the time. But it's difficult, beloveds. It's difficult to feel without understanding the answer to the question why, that it's possible to trust the divine in the presence of suffering. And that's why I wrote what I did, and I hope you all have a copy of it or have looked at it, that the battle, the conflict between Israel and Palestine, though localized in a geographical area, is a battle between light and darkness. And I tried to articulate for you what is it that is light and what is it that is darkness, because it's not entirely clear just at face value that we know what light is. But in what I've written, you'll see that light has a lot to do with maintaining our capacity for humanity and respect for life in the presence of dire circumstances. It's not only that, but it is a lot about that. So I would like some assistance to have somebody read the sequence of six points that I've made. And since you're nearest, you get to do it if you're willing to. Just read the first one and pause.
This is not just a battle between Israel and Palestine, but a battle between light and darkness.
Okay, so that is the overall context, that the world is witnessing a battle between light and darkness. And in our better natures, in our desire to be helpful, we have to ask ourselves, how do we align with light? Please read.
The battle is for the preservation or loss of one's sense of humanity, a determination of what respect for the humanity of others can remain, even in dire situations.
Yeah. So, as I said, this is a question of what happens when people suffer. When you suffer, when those you love suffer, when those you witness becoming dispossessed or homeless in Palestine and Gaza suffer, when people's families are lost to bombs that are falling in Israel, when they suffer, what do you do? Where do you go with that? So please continue.
The battle is also over the belief that the end justifies the means, and that as a result of such a belief, the harm toward or taking of innocent human life becomes valid.
Yeah. This is one of the things that is created as a belief by forces that have separated themselves from light, because the principle that governs light, which is of the divine, is that the end does not justify the means. The means and the end are two parts of the same thing and have to be two parts of the same thing in order to achieve an outcome that's positive and light-filled. The end and the means must resonate together. But when the emotions and when beliefs separate themselves from light, then the mind thinks, well, I have something good in mind. It's really good. I want to bring help to people. And so I have to accept that I can do something that's wrong in order to get to the place that's right. That's what the mind says. I have to do this in order to get there. And the light says, no, that is not the case. It says the means and the end have to be the same. Otherwise, where you get to will be corrupted by the fact that light has not filled the means.
Further, the battle is over the belief presented by the dark forces that there is no other way than the way one is pursuing, the way of inhumanity, that this is a price that one must pay. The battle is over the willingness to believe that there is always another way.
Right. So again, this is a way that we choose to align one way or the other with our beliefs, with our emotions, and with what we hold as the nature of reality. There is always another way means that light, the divine current that we hold to be the force of creation, offers something if we look for it that is not darkness, that is not the justification of violence, that is not the rationalization that it's okay to behave inhumanly because the end that we wish is a good end. There is always another way to find. It doesn't mean that it's always apparent, but in the beginning, but it means that it's always present. to look for. And of course, in this situation, we would look for and hope for, and many of us do not feel hopeful, that the way that would be the other way would be a way of something that's nonviolent, and that would be peaceful. In this present situation, it doesn't look like either party to the conflict is open to that, but that's what we would look for, the way that is the other way. Is there one more?
2. The battle is also over the belief in the capacity of the human heart to hold more than one point of view and to see a partial truth hidden in all sides of conflict.
So this is important, beloveds. Your heart is big enough, wise enough, true enough to itself, so that you can recognize partial truths in people when they speak, and in nations when they speak, and in leaders when they speak. You can recognize partial truths and see that there are different points of view, each of which may contain a kernel of truth. And so that wisdom in your heart needs to be reinforced so that the emotional current that may be very widespread doesn't carry you away with it. Now you can recognize a partial truth and say to yourself, this particular perspective has more truth in it than that, or this truth is very buried underneath a lot that's not true, that's false. You can be discerning like that too. But your heart is wise enough to not have to give itself over to the simplest level of explanation of who's at fault. The simplest level. The heart, your heart, is wise enough to not have to do that if you take the moment to feel within yourself, what do I really feel about the whole situation? And now again, I'm not just talking about Israel-Palestine. I'm talking about human suffering. I'm talking about the willingness that the mind has to eagerly say, who's at fault? They're doing this to me. And if they weren't doing it, then everything would be fine. It's the capacity to find a simple explanation which makes the whole thing clear, but it involves an oversimplistic explanation, usually of blame in one direction and leaving out responsibility in another direction. We do this in relationships all the time. We look for what other people are doing to us that makes them at fault and us right. So we do that all the time. But so do nations do that all the time. And so do large communities and groups of people do that. So have faith in your own heart, your own capacity to see things in a more modified way.
Finally, the battle is over the willingness to see all beings as descended from the one divine self that is the creator of all. This is the largest battle that is at stake, for it supports or detracts from the capacity of human beings to join together in love and unity and affects the planet as a whole.
This last point is the main point, because this planet, this beloved earth that we live on, is having a lot of challenges right now. Physical, environmental, political, social, and this one that has now arisen. Climate crisis, economic crises, all kinds of conditions which are creating great distress in many parts of the world. How we look at it has to do with what we believe is the essential reality of what is happening. And I would like to put to you, as you've heard me say before, that the essential reality of what's happening is that the earth is going through a transition in its consciousness so that light becomes strengthened and the possibility of unity can come into being as a reality. Unity through the recognition of there being only one that is all in all and that all are part of, that we call the Divine One. The unity comes from not human effort to figure out how to create unity, although that too. It comes from the recognition that we are all part of one divine, one source, one origin by many names, and that divine essence is indelibly imprinted in every living being without exception. And that unity is the movement that the earth is making now into that consciousness. But the forces that are arrayed to keep the past are going in the opposite direction. And they are creating polarization, separation, conflict, and now war. Those forces want to maintain the state of separated consciousness and not have the planet move into this more progressed, more light-filled state of unity. And that's what we're seeing in this Middle East situation. The forces of darkness wanting to create separation, polarization, antagonism, war, and then to get others lined up like that so that the world becomes polarized. We've seen it in this country, the US, and we see it in many places in the world today. And so, beloved ones, you make this choice about which direction, which belief, which reality you're choosing to be part of. Because it's easier to say, well, these two groups, these two sides, these two nations, look at their history. There's no way they can get together. Or in this country, you could say that about groups here. Look at the polarization that's taking place between political parties and between groups of people, and the antagonism that's so easy to ignite between people. You, beloveds, are here to stand for the principle of light and the unity of all in all, if you can do that and if you choose to do that. And that's the gift that we bring to life. We bring it to our own personal life with our relationships, that you are not other than me. You are not different than me. Yes, you're unique in your own God expression, but we have the same divine essence and come from the same place. You get to be the one who creates peace or the one who reinforces separation by your own free choice. So, beloveds, when we now, and I will close in a minute, I think, when we look at the Israeli-Palestinian situation, think with your heart and your mind whether what you're about to express as a belief is going to promote greater separation and greater mistrust that anything that is a reconciliation can happen, or whether you can hold that the reality we're living in is that the world is trying to unify. We are trying to move in the direction of becoming one. And these oppositional forces, wherever they can find a foothold, are expressing the opposite in all the ways that I wrote and that you can look at. Thank you, beloveds. Thank you for choosing to be on the earth at this time. You have a pivotal role to play, an important role to play, whether you think it's small or large. It's important that you hold the alignment with light so that you can be a channel for that light for others. Om Namo Bhagavate, Om Namo Namaha. I bow to the Supreme Being that lives within all. Namaskar.